Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining our Coveo for Sitecore demo webinar session. I'll be your host. My name is Clara Boulanger. I work on the marketing team here at Coveo, and I'm really excited to be a part of today's session. I'm also thrilled to be joined by our speaker, Paul Sheridan, who is a sales engineer at Coveo. I have a couple of housekeeping items to cover quickly before we get started. First, everyone is in listen-only mode. However, we do want to hear from you during today's presentation. We'll be answering questions at the end of this session, so please feel free to send those along using the Q&A section on your screen. Today's webinar is being recorded and you'll receive the presentation within 24 hours of the conclusion of the event. Finally, there will be a brief survey at the end of this session. Please help us improve future webinars by providing your feedback on the webinar content and experience. For those of you just joining us, welcome to our Coveo for Sitecore demo webinar session. Now let's get started. Paul, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Clara, and welcome everyone to today's session. As with these monthly sessions that we do regularly, it's really meant to be a bit of an introduction to Coveo for Sitecore. We'd be very happy to talk with you afterwards in a more one-on-one or personalized environment, but what we'd like to do today is to give you an overview of the architecture of Coveo for Sitecore, how intelligent search, AI or machine learning powered search within the Sitecore context can be helpful to yourselves, your organization, your customers. We'll start off with a couple of architecture slides, really to give you a bit of the background on Coveo for Sitecore, and then we'll go into some live demonstrations from existing customer sites and a bit of a deep dive into the architecture and how Coveo for Sitecore really works. I often like to start with this slide here, just to outline a little bit about what Coveo is, how Coveo works with Sitecore, and how you can build a search experience into your Sitecore environment. So Coveo at its core is search and indexing technology with a lot of interesting things built around it, which we'll get into some detail around. So usage analytics information, machine learning technologies built on top of that to improve the relevance of results, and connectors to a really wide variety of data sources. In particular, with regard to the Sitecore content management system, Coveo has been working with Sitecore for going on about 7 years now, and over the years improving and deepening that integration. Sitecore content, of course, can be published or pushed to Coveo to be indexed, to be made searchable. As new pages are created, as pages are updated, that push component through the indexing pipelines of Sitecore allows you to decide which pages should be indexed, which parts of pages should be indexed, and which properties or metadata around those pages should also be indexed. That might include security information or permissions information, and also Sitecore personalization information, profile cards and personas can also be indexed by Coveo and made available to the users who are hitting your site. Coveo also, of course, has connectors that allow you to index many other data sources. Very commonly, these might include YouTube videos, they might include non-Sitecore websites that are a part of your infrastructure, blogs perhaps, or job listings pages, things like that, but also specific applications ranging from collaboration tools to Salesforce CRM system, Microsoft Dynamics CRM, SharePoint, and the other data sources as well can be brought into this Coveo unified index, and potentially, depending on your use case or your needs, that same content can be searchable from within your Sitecore search page. Coveo, there is a Coveo module that does get installed on the Sitecore server, essentially to manage that integration from the indexing point of view and also from the search point of view. So we provide a set of components so that you build your search experience, build and configure that search experience to be tailored really to the needs of your users. Coveo itself, the unified index, resides in the cloud. So you do not need to maintain an infrastructure internally in your organization for the searchable index. That is hosted in the cloud. It is maintained by Coveo so that we ensure the high availability and scalability of that indexing and search platform. You, of course, your organization, of course, manages things like connectors to your different data sources. The indexes from Sitecore are managed from within the Sitecore control panel. And again, the search components are typically embedded into a search page hosted by Sitecore, although you can also embed Coveo search components or JavaScript framework into search pages that reside outside of Sitecore as well. We'll get into lots of details about all of this, including the tunable precision and relevance of search results. So you can define rules in your search page or in the Coveo platform as well to manage the relevance of results that are being returned to your users, potentially boosting certain kinds of content, frequently asked questions perhaps, or defining synonyms and rules around how search is going to work. And of course, as I've mentioned, based on the usage analytics, the behavior of the users on your site, what they search for, what they get results for, what they click on, what they select next, we can start to automatically promote the good results, the results that have been more useful to other users for future users. And for other users, you'll do similar queries or have similar personas in the future. And that's really the machine learning aspects of Coveo being used to tune relevance and to make recommendations and to make better query suggestions, type ahead, if you will. I'll go into a little bit of an outline of sort of the flow of what happens when somebody does a search using Coveo for Sitecore, just to kind of outline how things work. And then we'll show you some real examples as well. So of course, users come to your website, and of course they see a nice big search box front and center on the site. I think it's generally accepted that people have, end users have really the expectation that search is going to be the most effective way to find information on your site. Certainly navigation and landing pages are important, but search is really where people go nowadays in order to be able to find the information they want, whether this is an e-commerce site, a product catalog type of site, a customer support sort of site, or perhaps just an informational publishing website. The search is where most people go nowadays to find the information they require. So naturally, as someone starts to enter query terms, and they'll typically be entering a few short terms and phrases that people have been well trained by the search technologies that are out there to do exactly that. As they start to type in these terms, Coveo can propose query suggestions or result suggestions based on what they're entering. Now, that can be either based on tags, metadata from your Sitecore content or your non-Sitecore content, and or, of course, those suggestions can come from Coveo's machine learning technology, effectively suggesting queries that have been effective for other users in the past. I'll show you some nice examples of how that can be really useful to your users on your site. Of course, the user can select what is being proposed as a query suggestion or simply type in their search. Whichever approach they take, that query and that behavior and the context of the user. Context might include how Sitecore has recognized them as having a particular persona based on rules you've defined in the Sitecore experience database. It might also, the context may also include things like the location of the user or their browser preferences, what language they've selected as a browser preference, whether they're a mobile or non-mobile user. All of that information can be used not only by Sitecore to determine a persona, but it's also logged by Coveo into our usage analytics platform for you to report on, for you to understand your user's behavior, and also to feed into, again, Coveo's machine learning technology. Again, that query combined with the persona or the context of the user is passed to Coveo and can be used to start to propose good recommended results based on what other similar users have gotten to in the past. In addition, of course, Coveo sends that same query and that same contextual information to our searchable index, which can contain Sitecore content and content from many of these other sources that we're talking about as well, to return a merged result list. So recommendations from machine learning, but also, of course, the tuned search results based on rules that you may have set up or simply based on the searchable index itself. Those results can then be returned and formatted within Sitecore using features and functions like filters and facets, like different sort options and different layout options to return these results in a way that is formatted well to suit the layout of your website. And of course, the information about what's returned, what's clicked on, what's navigated after that is also logged to both the Sitecore Analytics database and also the Coveo Usage Analytics database. That information is very useful to you from a reporting point of view, and also because it feeds once again into the machine learning engine to start to make, again, good recommendations to other users in the future. But enough PowerPoint for now. Let's have a look at a couple of real example websites here. showing Coveo being used on Sitecore sites. I try to pick a couple of different examples that have quite different use cases. The first one is a relatively recent customer of Coveo for Sitecore, and that's Alcatel-Lucent, a technology company who are mostly using their site for searching documentation and information about their products. It's not really a commerce-related site exactly. It's almost more along the lines of a customer self-service, documentation, self-help kind of site. As you can see, they're using a number of Coveo components here to help the users to refine their query, to drill down to the sort of information that they're really looking for. And in my experience, it's really important to choose useful facets, filters like you see over here on the left-hand side. Alcatel-Lucent has gone for really a hierarchical kind of structure where users are able to select quite clearly the sort of information they're looking for. Is it collateral? Is it manuals? Are there videos that they're looking for? And also around particular products and devices that they market and sell. So if the user does know the sort of information or the sort of product that is looking for information on, of course, they can select a facet or indeed multiple facets to narrow down the results that are being returned to them. And you'll see also a count of how many pages exist for each of these parts of their hierarchy. They're also using tabs across the top, and these are also Coveo components, once again, as another way to drill down to particular kinds of content. And effectively, these tabs are really just saved searches. So they may involve the same sort of thing as selecting a filter or a facet, but they're somewhat easier for a user to understand, perhaps. These are optional components, and you can use both or neither of these, depending on the kind of website that you're trying to build. You'll also see here the option to sort in a variety of ways. We can sort results clearly by relevance, and there's a number of factors that go into calculating relevance of items, but also quite often it's useful to sort your results by date to find the latest news, for example, or the latest customer references, perhaps, related to the query at hand. And of course, as the user does start to type in a search, you'll see results or queries being suggested to the user. In the case of Alcatel-Lucent, they are taking advantage of Coveo's machine learning to do query suggestion based on the sort of searches that have been useful to other users in the past. And you notice that even though I've intentionally misspelled the word phone here, we're still getting good quality query suggestions. And this is really the part of the power, I think, of machine learning driven query suggestion. We can still make good suggestions even though the user is not typing in exactly what others have searched for in the past. And it's really the kind of experience that people have become used to and expect through other search technologies as well. But this is very much focused on the queries that have happened on this particular website. So it's not general searches across all of the web or indeed all of the sites that Coveo is in use for. It's really specific to Alcatel-Lucent's site. The result list template or the result list that you see here is actually a fairly generic example, more or less out of the box example of what Coveo and Sitecore can look like as well here. Quite typically, you'll see a little extract of the document or the page in question with certain terms being highlighted in it. You can also decide which other metadata may be useful to you to display, whether it's a last date update or last date updated, pardon me, the size of a document, what language it's in. And you can define different kinds of result list templates for different kinds of content. Clearly for videos, perhaps it might make sense to display other sorts of information there. You might also see that if I make a selection for a facet as part of my search, there's also breadcrumbs being displayed here to help the user to drill down or drill back up, I suppose, to unselect those selections easily, to make the whole experience very immersive and very engaging for the user on the site. That's, I think, a fairly simple example of an implementation of Coveo for Sitecore that has really a information publication, self-service sort of use case. I'll show you a couple others that are a bit different. Healthspan UK is an organization that sells health-related products, primarily in the United Kingdom. And they have a very commerce-focused website for the most part. So they're trying to sell products to their customers. Again, they've selected certain kinds of metadata information to be used as filters for different types of users. They're searching a product catalog primarily, but there are also a set of articles that are indexed and searched by Coveo. And these may be PDF files, they may be HTML pages. Coveo supports a really wide variety of document formats here, as well as, of course, straightforward Sitecore pages. And whether I search for something along the lines of vitamins, once again, it doesn't really matter if I know how to spell it correctly. We're able to make good quality suggestions based on the behavior of other users. I can search for information about multivitamins. I can sort my results, not only by relevance. We're dealing with a product catalog here, which really probably has a fairly small amount of text for each product. But I could also search by price or sort by price, by rating, if they're using Sitecore or another platform to rate certain products here as well. So a nice example, I think, of a commerce-related website where information like pricing and rating by customers is available and usable. They're also flagging different kinds of items with tags indicating whether it's a new product or not, or it's a sale product. And this really, again, plays very much into the integration between Coveo and Sitecore. We can pick up on all this metadata that's being pushed to us to be indexable and to be searchable, whether that's just being displayed or being used for filters. That's all important to push to Coveo to be indexed. I'll show one more example of, once again, a fairly recent customer of Coveo for Sitecore, and this is a Dignity Memorial. They're a funeral services provider. And they have a lot of content on their site, including a lot of obituaries, although Coveo is not actually being used to index those. That's quite a separate database. Where we are being used is in searching for both information. They publish a lot of information to help people choose an appropriate funeral home or cemetery, for example, but also location-based searching for perhaps nearby funeral homes and cemeteries. And as an example, you can search for a specific location, and the results are being returned in the format of a map. So this is Coveo actually being used to do the search across the catalog of funeral homes, to limit them by location, and to return those results in a really easy navigation manner. So Coveo's results are returned in really a JSON format, and you can then decide how you want them to be returned, whether it should be in a result list, a more or less traditional result list like you can see on the left-hand side, or in a map format. Coveo is not actually doing the mapping. This is really just results being returned, I think, here to Google Maps. But Coveo is doing the searching and the relevance here as well, and also potentially the filtering. There's additional metadata associated with each record about a funeral home, what kind of services they provide, what languages are spoken at these locations, and other amenities here as well. So again, I think an easy to use and well thought out user interface, catering to the needs of people who are coming to this kind of site. So to me, there is very much a link between the technology that provides both the content, of course, Sitecore, and the searchability of that content, Coveo, together with the user experience design to make it into a useful site. I will show one more example here, but this is not actually a real customer. This is a bit of a demo site, and I use this to really demonstrate some of what Coveo can do with integrated into Sitecore regarding personalization. I mentioned earlier on that Coveo is able to take advantage of any Sitecore personalization rules and profile card tagging that you've done on your content in order to enhance the search experience, to take advantage of the work that you do around personalization within the search context. So if I go to this site and I navigate around and I make a few selections, Sitecore potentially, of course, as you're aware, can, based on that, decide what kind of persona I am. I'm looking at kitchen appliances here. I'm in kind of the Sitecore debug mode, so I can see what is my behavior telling Sitecore about what kind of persona I am. Sitecore, based on my click behavior, has decided I'm potentially a kitchen buyer. So how does Coveo work with that? Well, if I then go in and start to do a search for something like power, just as a simple example, the results I'm going to get are kitchen-related results, kitchen appliances, and so on. And you'll notice here that we do also provide components to allow either the user or, again, the search designer to select how they would like the layout, easily select how they would like the layout to look. Is this more of a card kind of view, nice big pictures, or more of a textual list kind of point of view? Again, the ability potentially to sort in a variety of ways here as well. Now, if on the other hand, I've gone in and I've gone and looked at some other sorts of products. For example, this fictional company Habitat also makes computer gaming consoles and such. I go and make a little click over here, perhaps. Sitecore is now able to say, oh, you're not actually a kitchen buyer at all. You're a home buyer based on the sort of things that you've been looking at. Well, if I now go and do that same kind of query again for power, you'll see that the results being returned now are a bit different. So this is the sort of experience, the sort of personalized experience, the combination of Sitecore personalization and Coveo's integration with Sitecore personalization can help you to provide for your customers at scale. So how does all this work? Well, I'd like to show you a little bit of kind of the back end of Coveo and Sitecore and how they work together. I'm going to start off by logging into my Sitecore interface here. Now, as I'd mentioned, there is a Coveo component that gets installed into your Sitecore environment, and you'll see it here in the Sitecore control panel, including, for example, a diagnostics page where information about the version of Coveo for Sitecore, both the components installed on your server and, of course, the Coveo cloud itself, understand that configuration and those versions. You'll also see in a second when it finishes loading, that there are a set of configuration files on your Sitecore server, and that's really where you define how content is being indexed, that Sitecore indexing pipeline, what pages should be indexed, what parts of the Sitecore content tree, and indeed what metadata is important to be indexed, to be displayed, to be usable for filtering, and so on. All of that available to you here within the Sitecore control panel. You will also see that if you are looking to do a complete rebuild of your indexes, if you've changed your Sitecore schema, that's really all managed again through the indexing manager, just as if these were Solar or Lucene indexes. So Coveo's tight integration to Sitecore makes the process of administering your search indexes a very simple one. Now, how do we create and configure the come up here? So we got our set of configuration files and the connection to the Coveo server here as well. And also, again, those Coveo indexes. We really replace the master and the web indexes of Sitecore with Coveo in order to be able to provide the most relevant content to your users when they're searching. Now, creating the search experience, the search pages, if you will, within Sitecore is really done within the experience editor. So I can go in here into my particular site, and I've got a Coveo search page, along with, of course, all my other content here. The Coveo search page, again, can be edited within the experience editor, and this is where we deploy the components that the Coveo provides, and really you can define how you want this search page to work. Once this page is loaded, we'll see a set of components here that I've dragged and dropped onto this particular page. And if I wanted to add additional components, it's really a matter of clicking here, adding new components. You're not necessarily building code outside of Sitecore, having to write code. You're dropping components onto this page and then configuring them. As a simple example, there's kind of a master component called the Coveo search interface. And this is where you can do things like define rules for boosting certain kinds of results, as an example. You'll notice that these are very much like other Sitecore rules editors. So if I wanted to, as an example, boost a certain kind of content from the Sitecore content tree, for example, let's say this is the retail site. I wanted to boost messages, perhaps, that are coming out of my retail campaigns. Let's create a little rule to do exactly that. The idea being here that we're able to enable the people who are creating your Sitecore experience to make changes to how search is going to work without necessarily having to call in the development team or the partners to do that kind of work. Other sorts of options that you have available to you, I'm not going to go through all of them today as we have a relatively limited amount of time, but defining automatic boosting based on persona, as we saw in the little example I was just showing you a moment ago. You can also define similar rules to filter results, so deciding what should be displayed at all on this particular search page. You may well have multiple different search pages on your site or sites, and of course Coveo can support multiple instances of Sitecore in a single Coveo cloud instance. Many other options here as to whether you want to include or exclude media items, bucket folders, things like that, and excluding what we call here external content, content that doesn't come from Sitecore. I'll show you in just a moment how we can index non-Sitecore content as well, crawling websites, indexing your YouTube channel, and so on. But you can add them into this particular search experience very easily. Similarly, here you'll see options like filters and facets, like we saw on the example here. Very easy to go and edit these as well. You don't necessarily need to get into the code level to do that sort of thing. Selecting which field this facet should be based on, typically properties or fields from Sitecore. Different templates for what information to display in a result list, whether you're looking at a card or a list view. And again, these sorting options are, again, Coveo components that you can use to decide which fields you want to be able to sort on, whether it's distance or relevance or price or alphabetical order. Many different options available to you here. But again, what I really want to emphasize is that the building of the search experience is an intrinsic part, really, of your Sitecore site. There is, of course, also a Coveo component to manage as well. And one thing I do want to emphasize there is that usage analytics and dashboard reporting capability. So we are logging, typically, what do people search for, context around the person who's doing a search, whatever we can pick up about them, whether it's a persona, their location based on IP address, whether they're on a mobile or non-mobile device, that information, as well as, of course, what they search for, what they click on, if anything, do they get any results? These sort of pieces of information are really of great interest to your business analysts to understand how well is search working on my site? Are people finding what they're looking for? What do they click on when they do a particular search? So this sort of information is of key importance on an ongoing basis to continue to improve the content of your site and the search rules around your site as well. So you can configure these dashboards really quite easily to suit the particular needs that you have. A variety of kinds of dashboards and reports. You can look at, for example, a little search summary report. Some of the interesting things that you can get into here beyond just what do people search for and what do they click on might include things like searches that have no results or searches that don't lead to clicks, or potentially, if you've got a commerce site, searches that lead to purchases, so that you can start to understand what's really working well from your business goals point of view. You'll also see over here in a moment, once this loads, things like more aggregate information, query click-through percentage for particular searches, average click rank. Did people click on the first item, the second item, the third item? And of course, if you're also logging other events like purchase events or support requests, those can also be logged in here as well, and you can build dashboards and reports around those to really understand the impact of search on your business. Taking this information, of course, and taking action on it is the sort of thing that often you will do in what we call our query pipelines. Query pipelines are just a set of business rules around search, kind of similar to the rules that I showed you in the Sitecore interface. But this is also where you can define things like synonyms. So if, for example, you're noticing that users are searching for the word espresso on your site, and in fact, you have a lot of information about coffee, but nothing about espresso, it might make sense to define a synonym like this. You can also boost top results for particular queries. You can define rules around boosting certain kinds of content. In this case, we've also got rules around persona, but these could be based on location or any other contextual information. Lots of options that you can potentially configure. And what we often would recommend is that you take a look at that usage analytics, listen to what the users are telling you through the search box before you start defining too many rules in here as well. But defining these sort of rules together with using machine learning to automatically make good quality query suggestions and tuning results automatically, it can be a really powerful way of tuning the search experience, the user experience. Lots of other capabilities and options in here. I'd love to spend some time with you on a more one-on-one basis talking about these and how they may fit into your particular needs. I guess the other thing I would highlight is the ability to index more than just Sitecore. I'm just going to switch into a different environment for a second to show you what that can look like. So whether it's indexing your blogs, your website, your YouTube channels, Coveo provides a lot of different connectors to allow you to index these kinds of sources and to really configure them appropriately so that we're pulling up the most useful information and displaying that to the user as well, focusing the nature of your search, whether that content that they're searching comes from Sitecore or elsewhere. A couple of the things I'd like to highlight really outside of the product. Clearly, we'd like to hear from you if you think that Coveo for Sitecore can be useful within your business. Very happy to take any questions that you have at the end of this session as well. Also, please do have a look at our website at coveo.com. Lots of good information there, especially about our Coveo for Sitecore offering, the various editions that there are. There's really a Pro edition and Enterprise edition that have some differences in the functionality available to them. There's also a free 30-day trial. So if you have, if you want to try it out in your sandbox environment, you can very easily set up a 30-day trial of Coveo for Sitecore in that sandbox environment, and we'd be happy to help you get started with that as well, whether it's yourselves or your Sitecore implementation partner. Often a really nice way to get started, but we'd obviously be very happy to talk to you as well. And with that, I think I'll wrap up today's session. And Clara, if there are any questions coming in, I'd be happy to try and take some of those on the session or follow up with an email afterwards.
Thank you, Paul, for this great session. As Paul mentioned, please type your questions in the question panel to your right. There's still time to answer those, so feel free to ask any questions you may have. We do have a few questions already. So Paul, first question would be, are analytics available for all versions of Coveo for Sitecore?
Yes, absolutely. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I will say that there's one exception. I've just brought up here the Coveo for Sitecore website page. You do see that we list our Pro Cloud and Enterprise Cloud versions. Coveo Analytics are available for both of those. There is still a free edition of Coveo for Sitecore. It is on premises, so you wouldn't, as opposed to the example that we've been talking through, which is hosted in the cloud. This actually doesn't require the installation of some Coveo software on premises, and it does not include a number of things, including usage analytics. But if you have specific questions about the different editions, I'd really urge you to have a look at this particular page that outlines the Coveo for Sitecore editions here as well.
Thank you. Another question we have, how do you do a private VPN connection, and what's the speed from the cloud to your site?
How do we do private
VPN connection?
We don't do a private VPN connection. So Coveo is hosted in a public cloud. We do any communication between your Sitecore environment, be it on your premises or hosted in Azure or elsewhere. All the communication, publishing, indexing of content is pushed from Sitecore to Coveo. There's no need for you to open an inbound connection from the Coveo cloud to your environment. It's all push-based. Of course, all the communication is encrypted, both in transit and at rest, whether that's indexing or queries or results being returned. So based on all that, we don't actually support a private VPN connection between your environment and Coveo, but we'd be happy to talk with you more about your requirements in that area.
Thank you. Another question, is there a custom role that manages the Coveo administration, and can other roles be members of that role?
Oh, good question. Yes, we do support a variety of different roles for administrators. And you can define the sort of rights that you have for these different groups. Typically, by default, we'll break these down into administrators, people who deal with analytics, whether it's creating new reports or simply viewing them, and other kinds of users. But you can customize exactly what permissions or capabilities each role has here within Coveo.
Thank you. Are the out-of-the-box Coveo components web forms or MCV components? MVC, sorry.
Yeah, they are MVC. We do, I believe, still support web forms, but moving forward, it's really going to be all MVC.
Thank you. Does Coveo support language fallback feature that comes with third-party module like?
I know what you're about to ask. I think the Alex Shiba module.
Yes, sorry. I thought that was
not a problem. I've heard the question a number of times. We don't fully support that. What we do support is with Sitecore version 8.2, I believe, and up, there is a more out-of-the-box language fallback option. Coveo does support that. So we'd be happy again to talk with you more about your requirements in this area, but language fallback as delivered in Sitecore 8.2 and up is supported by Coveo for Sitecore.
Thank you. Do you provide any managed search service for customers, for example, where customers have no hands-on at all?
Oh, that's an interesting question. We typically don't. More often that might be delivered by a mutual third-party system integrator partner. Coveo ourselves typically don't do that kind of managed services. But again, we'd be interested to talk to you about your requirements in that area, and potentially we could maybe recommend a third-party system integrator who does offer that kind of service more regularly.
Thank you. Another question. I am having a dev machine and using trial version. I don't get query suggestions since it gets reset every month. Any suggestions on handling this?
Yes, I would have a couple. Query suggestions can come, as I mentioned really briefly, from a couple different sources. They can come from machine learning, effectively learning from what users are searching for and what generates good quality results. And I can understand how with your 30-day trial and create another 30-day trial, that information is reset. Query suggestion, if to use that kind of query suggestion, you can also kind of preload queries and clicks through effectively a query bot. Our development team has put together a little example that you could potentially use, and it is open sourced and available on GitHub. And if you reach out to us, I can put you in touch with that. That's one potential approach, can be useful. Another is that query suggestions can also come from metadata from your actual index. So typically you might have a keywords property, for example, on your Sitecore content. Setting up query suggestions to come from that field isn't terribly hard. I'd be happy to point you to how to do that. So, if this is sort of a demo environment you're trying to put together, that might be a good approach in terms of query suggestion. What we often refer to as field suggestion as opposed to machine learning driven query suggestion. And yeah, we'd be very happy to talk with you about what would be most appropriate for your needs. So please do, Clara, I'll grab that person's email address and we can talk about it in more detail afterwards.
Thank you. Another question. What are some scenarios you could use code since most Coveo is placing components and configuration?
Yeah, no, that's a good question too. Quite often what we'll see is that, I'll swap back over here into the viewer here. Quite often what we'll see is that the result list templates, so the layout for particular kinds of results, might require a little bit of work in code. As I scroll on down here, you see here that the result template is actually pointing to a CS HTML file. So that's something that you would probably need to write. In some cases also, if you are using the Pro edition of Coveo for Sitecore, those rules editors that we saw for boosting certain kinds of content, that rules editor, that easy to use Sitecore rules-like editor, is something that's only available in the Enterprise edition. So if you wanted to have that same kind of functionality to boost certain kinds of content, you would do that in code. Now we do document exactly how to do that very clearly, but that's the kind of thing that you might do in code. I would say also the configuration files that you set up to determine what should be indexed, what should not be indexed. That's changing a configuration file. You could arguably call that code as well. So there are some areas where you might want to do some coding. You might also look at modifying our CSS style sheets to make the components that we provide, these facets, filters, sort options, really correspond to the look and feel of your site. So those are, I would say, some of the most common areas where you would do some coding.
Thank you. Another question we have, what is the best approach, item crawling or web page crawling?
Well, it probably depends on your requirement, on your site and how you want to return results. But generally speaking, web page crawling seems to be the most effective. in most cases, so that you want to return a page rather than just say an image. In this example here, when someone searches for the Habitat Odyssey phone, you'd prefer to return the page that contains these items, like an image, like a price, and so on. So web page crawling, in most cases, seems to be what most people want to do.
Thank you. If some content cannot be accessed by all users in Sitecore, should it be indexed by Coveo? Can Coveo integrate with user rights?
Oh, yeah, great question as well. Yes, by default, although you can change this option, we will also index the permissions information associated with each Sitecore page. And so automatically, we will limit the results to only what the current user can see. So if a non-logged in user would only be able to see content that has no restrictions around permissions, and a logged in user, of course, we would respect the Sitecore permissions attributes of each item or each page.
Thank you. Next question. What is the best way to learn, train yourself in the tweaking, improving search results? Ideally, something that can be done by authorizing staff and not via an agency or third-party partner.
Yeah, good questions. Good questions all today. So we do provide a variety of levels of training, and indeed even certification. I've just gone here to our website to show you what some of these are. There are training courses that are common to Coveo. Does offer several different products: a Coveo platform, Coveo for Sitecore, Coveo for Salesforce, Coveo for Microsoft Dynamics. There are some common training courses: Coveo Fundamentals and Basic Analytics and Reporting, which I think are really good to take. There are also more administrator level courses, including one specific to Coveo for Sitecore. And there's also a developer level course, and that's about a 3-day course, typically delivered in person. Most often we see that that's used by our mutual third-party system integrator partners, but occasionally we do have customers who want to do some of the development detail themselves. In addition to that, there are some self-paced training videos here as well, so you can take some of these courses. There is also this video library of really up to about 5-minute long sessions, some of which are specific to Sitecore, some of which are not, and quite possibly worth a look as well. One other thing I would highlight is a few of my colleagues have recently worked on what we call a project guide. So if you are looking to do perhaps a 30-day trial of Coveo for Sitecore, it gives you a really good outline of best practices around search in general, and certainly around Coveo for Sitecore. So if I was to search here for project guide, we'll see here this, actually, I would go with the second item here, this PDF file, which is an excellent, I'd say about 30 or so page long guide to how to implement Coveo for Sitecore in sort of a trial mode most effectively. I think there's some excellent content in there. Hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And is it possible to also index content that's external from Sitecore? For example, other sites or data sources?
Absolutely. So back in the Coveo administration tool here, you can see some of the examples that I've indexed from a variety of sites for demo information, but here's a list of the kinds of content that we typically can integrate with, whether it's cloud-based sources, potentially databases within your organization or file systems. We have an indexing API, our push API, which really the connector to Sitecore is built on top of, but you could also use it to index really custom content within your organization. And of course, sitemaps and web crawlers and a REST API. So many different kinds of content that you might want to integrate into your Sitecore search experience available through Coveo.
Thank you. Can you restrict searches to originate from one site so no one can steal your search API?
Can you restrict searches to one site so no one can steal your search API? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So you can limit your results. I mean, typically by default, that sort of search page we were looking at was limited to only Sitecore content. And of course, you could limit it to specific parts of the content tree. And really that limitation is being done on the Sitecore server. So yeah, there's no ability then for someone to look at the source code for the search page and in fact extend search to cover all the rest of your content. You can also use, for secured content, we certainly recommend the use of a search API token embedded within the page so that, again, searches are secured and content, only the correct content, only the publicly available content, pardon me, is actually returned.
Thank you, Paul. I think there are no more questions in the queue, and now would be a great time to wrap up. If you happen to have any more questions, please feel free to email us, and we'll make sure to respond as soon as possible. Just a couple of quick reminders before we sign off. We'll send the recording to all attendees within the next 24 hours, and please remember to help us improve future webinars by completing the brief survey at the end of this session. On behalf of Paul and the rest of the team, I'd like to thank you for attending our Coveo for Sitecore demo webinar session. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.